The unthinkable ascent. The silence was the first thing to leave him. It was a profound, absolute quiet, the kind known only to those who have slept between the stars. Fleet Commander Susugo of the Dugo Conquest Fleet felt it recede like a tide, replaced by the low, resonant hum of the Endless Blade, his flagship. The cold sleep cocoon hissed, retracting its biofeeder lines from the ports in his exoskeleton. His 4 dark eyes, too large and forward-facing, too smaller and set wider on his tapered skull, blinked open, adjusting to the soft amber light of the revival chamber. 20 years. A blink in the lifetime of a star, a significant portion of his own. They had departed 82 G Eridani with a single, glorious purpose, to bring the pre-industrial sentience of the third planet into the Imperial fold. The most recent intelligence, gathered by a stealth probe that had drifted through the system in the 12th century of the local calendar, painted a picture of a primitive, divided species. They fought with swords and arrows. Their greatest structures were cathedrals of stone. Their skies were clean and silent. It was to be a rapid, clinical victory. A harvest. Susugo moved to the command nexus, his long, multi-jointed limbs carrying him with practiced grace. The star field on the main viewer was unfamiliar, dominated by a bright, yellow star, and there, a blue and white marble, stunning in its simplicity. "Final approach calculations are complete, Commander," a subordinate chirped. "Orbital insertion in 3 cycles." Susugo allowed himself a moment of pride. The armada, 100 ships strong, hung in the void around him, a testament to the Dugo's might. This world would be a jewel in the Emperor's crown. "Commander?" The voice was hesitant. Communications Officer Clear approached, his antennae twitching with unease. "Anomaly, Commander." "Explain." "Radio emissions. Filling multiple spectrums. Complex, modulated. They blanket the planet." Susugo's mandibles clicked in irritation. "Impossible. Sensor ghost. Or stellar interference. The probe data is unequivocal. They are pre-industrial." "The signals are real, Commander. Their point of origin is the planet's surface." A cold knot, separate from the chill of cryosleep, formed in Susugo's thorax. He dismissed the officer with a wave. It was a mistake. It had to be. But as the fleet slid into orbit, in what the planet's inhabitants called December, the mistake solidified into a terrifying, impossible reality. Cities of glass and steel glimmered on the night side. Networks of light connected them. Satellites, thousands of them, cluttered the high orbitals. Thermal scans showed immense power generation. Their vessels, though primitive and confined to their atmosphere, were numerous and complex. In 800 years, a mere 800 years, for a species whose own technology had plateaued for 50 millennia, it was an evolutionary eye blink. It was unthinkable. For 6 months, the fleet watched, listened, and learned. They mapped defenses, analyzed transmissions, and studied the bewildering, chaotic tapestry of human civilization. Susugo sat in his command chair, a deep and growing dread supplanting his initial confidence. This was not a harvest. It was a war. In May, he convened the Pinu, the shiplords of the fleet. Their faces, displayed on holoscreens around him, were a mosaic of Dugo subspecies, all etched with the same unease. The data is clear," Susugo stated, his voice betraying none of his turmoil. "The target species has achieved an industrial and early digital civilization at a pace without precedent. Their military capabilities, while dispersed and disorganized, are significant." "Do we abort?" Shiplord Varek asked, his voice a dry rasp. "The Emperor's decree allows for discretionary withdrawal in the face of unforeseen existential threat." Existential. The word hung in the air. To call off the invasion would mean returning home in disgrace. To explain to the Emperor that a species they had deemed primitive had, in less than a millennium, leaped towards the stars. He would be stripped of his command, his lineage shamed for generations. The Dugo did not tolerate failure. Susugo's pride, a colder and more rigid thing than any fear, made the decision for him. "We will not abort," he said, his voice hardening. "Their advancement is rapid, but shallow. They are fractious, divided. They lack unity. We will hit them with overwhelming, coordinated force. They will break. The assault will commence as planned." The light was not a light anyone on Earth had ever seen. It was a false dawn that bloomed in the heavens, a silent, sun-bright flower of death. Moments later, a second, then a third. On the ground in the sprawling, rain-slicked city of Seattle, Blake Ursa Cameliga was finishing a late-night coffee. The radio in his ambulance crackled and died. The streetlights flickered and went out. The city plunged into a deep, profound blackness, the kind that hadn't been known for over a century. The only light came from the eerie, pulsating auroras that danced where the bombs had detonated. EMP. "What in the hell?" his partner Mike whispered, staring up at the sky. Blake didn't answer. A deep primal alarm was screaming in his gut. This wasn't a blackout. This was an attack. Then the screams started, and the sound of the first impacts. It wasn't an invasion from the sea or across a border. It was a rain of fire from the sky. Streaking meteors that resolved into angular, insectoid dropships screamed through the atmosphere, ignoring crippled air defenses. They targeted infrastructure, military bases, and major highways. Blake's ambulance became a refuge, then a target. A low-flying skimmer, like a malevolent dragonfly, strafed their street with plasma fire. Mike didn't make it. Blake, thrown from the vehicle by the concussive force, landed in a ditch, the world a roaring, burning nightmare. He crawled out, his EMT training the only thing holding his panic at bay. The triage center wasn't a hospital anymore. It was a crater. The rules had changed. The first rule now was to survive. The second was to fight back. From orbit, the initial reports were promising. Susugo watched the tactical display. Landing zones in North America, Europe, and Asia were secured. Human aircraft, those that could get airborne, were swatted from the sky by superior technology. Their ground vehicles were incinerated. Bases were being established. The Emperor would be pleased. Then the after-action reports began to trickle in. "Commander, Patrol 7 Alpha has failed to report from the Seattle Metro Zone." "Commander, we are experiencing significant localized resistance in Landing Zone Gamma. They are targeting our patrols with improvised explosives." "Commander, a supply depot was overrun. They took weapons, technology." Susugo stared at the reports. They weren't fighting a conventional army. They were fighting a ghost. The humans refused to stand and fight in the open. They melted into their ruined cities, into their forests. They learned. They adapted. Blake learned fast. The initial shock gave way to a cold, focused fury. He found others. A Marine cut off from his unit. A tech whiz whose entire world had been a server farm. A hunter from the Olympic Peninsula. They were survivors. They became a family. They called themselves the Scavengers. Their mission was simple. Hurt the invaders and take their stuff. They learned to spot Dugo patrol patterns. They learned that the aliens' advanced sensors were less effective in heavy rain and urban clutter. They learned to hit fast and vanish. But their biggest breakthrough came from a lucky ambush. They hit a Dugo patrol on a mountain road using a landslide to trap their armored vehicle. In the fierce firefight that followed, the Marine Corporal Evans was killed. But they took the vehicle. Inside was a treasure trove. Plasma rifles, communication gear, and most importantly, the body of a Dugo soldier. Its carapace cracked open by a well-placed rifle shot. They dragged it all back to their base, an abandoned network of pre-war storm drains beneath the city. "Can you do anything with this, David?" Blake asked the tech whiz, a young man with wild eyes named David. David's hands trembled as he touched the alien metal. "Are you kidding me? This is everything. Their comms use a quantum entangled encryption. It's insane. But their power cells, I think I can figure out the power cells." Weeks turned into a grueling routine of scavenging, fighting, and learning. David, fueled by a terrifying genius and rage, began to reverse engineer the Dugo technology. He cracked their squad-level comms. They could listen in. Blake, hunched over salvage radio, heard the clipped, alien tones of the Dugo patrols. He heard their frustration. He heard their fear. They were not invincible. They could be bled. One transmission stood out. A high-priority logistics shipment was moving through the Cascades. Heavy escort. "Something big," the intercepted comm said. "For the orbital relay." It was a risk, a huge one. But it was also an opportunity too great to ignore. "We hit it," Blake said, his voice leaving no room for argument. He was no longer just an EMT. He was their leader. His authority was forged in loss and proven in fire. The ambush was a masterpiece of asymmetrical warfare. They didn't attack the convoy on the road. They collapsed a bridge in front of it and behind it, trapping it in a steep valley. Then they attacked from the ridges above with stolen plasma rifles and old-fashioned .50 caliber rifles. The firefight was brutal. The Dugo fought with disciplined ferocity, their energy shields deflecting all but the most powerful hits. But the humans held the high ground. One by one, the alien vehicles were silenced. The prize was in the central transport, a cylindrical device, humming with contained power, covered in unfamiliar runes. It was a part of their communications array, the key to their command and control. As they secured the device, a Dugo skimmer screamed into the valley. It wasn't a patrol craft. It was a command shuttle. It hovered, its weapons not firing. A figure stood in the open bay door. Susugo. He had come to see for himself, to see the ghost that was bleeding his occupation force. His multifaceted eyes scanned the scene of the ambush, the fallen Dugo, the humans dragging the precious component away. His gaze locked with Blake's across the smoky valley. For a moment, two commanders from different worlds understood each other perfectly. This was no longer an invasion. It was a contest. Blake raised a plasma rifle, not at the shuttle, but in a defiant salute. Susugo did not react. He simply watched, the cold truth finally freezing the last of his pride. The intelligence was wrong. They were not primitive. They were predators, and they had just learned to use his own teeth against him. The shuttle banked and shot back towards the sky, towards the orbiting endless blade. Back in the storm drains, David worked feverishly on the cylindrical device. "It's not just a relay," he whispered, his face lit by its eerie blue glow. "Blake, it's two-way key. I think I can use it. Not just to listen, but to talk." Blake looked at the humming alien technology, then at the determined, grimy faces of his team. They had taken the Dugo's weapons. Now they would take their voice. "Do it," he said. In the silence of his command nexus, surrounded by the magnificent technology of an empire 50,000 years old, Fleet Commander Susugo waited for the ghost to speak. Epilogue. The static and the silence. The storm drains hummed with a new kind of energy. It was no longer just the gurgle of runoff or the nervous chatter of the scavengers. It was the deep, resonant thrum of the alien device, now integrated into a chaotic nest of human wiring, salvaged computer parts, and David's terrifying ingenuity. The cylindrical core pulsed with a soft, ethereal blue light, casting long, dancing shadows on the damp concrete walls. Blake stood over David's shoulder, his arms crossed. His knuckles were scarred, his face was smudged with grime and exhaustion. But his eyes were sharp, fixed on the screen of a repurposed laptop. "It's ready," David whispered, his voice hoarse from days of caffeine-fueled work and muttered calculations. His fingers hovered over the enter key. "The signal is raw. I'm just amplifying the device's own carrier wave and piggybacking our message on it. It's not aimed. It's a shout into the dark." "That's all we have," Blake said, his voice low. "A shout." He looked around at the faces of his team. The hunter, Anya, her expression grim, her hand resting on the stock of her plasma rifle. The few remaining Marines, their uniforms now indistinguishable from the rest in their patched, practical grime. They were all looking at him, waiting. For months their war had been contained. A bitter, dirty secret fought in the ruins of Seattle. They had bled the Dugo, stolen their tech, and learned their weaknesses. But they were losing the wider war. The Dugo orbital relay was almost complete. Once it was operational, their command and control would be seamless, their grip on the planet absolute. This stolen component was a setback for Susugo, not a defeat. This was their only play, a desperate, mad gamble. What if... Anya started, then stopped. She didn't need to finish. The fear was in all of them. What if someone else hears it? Blake had lain awake every night since they'd captured the device, turning that same question over in his mind. The cosmos, according to the intercepted Dugo data David had partially decrypted, was not a friendly place. It was old and silent, and the few species that traveled the stars did so with the grim purpose of the Dugo, or did not travel at all. The Dugo were conquerors, but they were a known quantity. What lay beyond them? What if they called forth something that made the Dugo look benevolent? Blake met David's anxious eyes. "We don't have a choice. If we do nothing, the Dugo win. They consolidate, they exterminate, and they turn this planet into just another resource for their empire. This," he gestured to the humming device, "this is the only choice. Do it." David took a deep breath and pressed the key. There was no dramatic sound, no burst of light. The pulse of the blue light simply intensified for a fraction of a second, and a line of text scrolled across David's screen. Carrier wave modulated. Broadcast initiated. The message was simple, a composite of every language database David could access, repeated on a loop. It was Blake's voice, stripped of all emotion, stating plain facts. "This is the planet Earth. We are under unlawful occupation by the forces of the Dugo Empire of 82G Eridani. We are a sovereign species. We request aid. We are being exterminated. Please, anyone, hear us." His words, were now racing outwards at the speed of light, flowing through a communications medium humanity didn't understand, echoing into the infinite deep. A profound silence fell over the chamber. The deed was done. There was no taking it back. On the bridge of the endless blade, the alarm was soft, almost polite. A dedicated console, monitoring the progress of the new orbital relay, flickered. Communications Officer Kalir stiffened, his antennae vibrating. "Commander Susugo! The component! The one lost in the ambush. Its unique quantum signature is active?" Susugo turned from a tactical display of pacification efforts in Eurasia. "Location? It is not broadcasting its location, Commander. It is broadcasting a general, wideband transmission. On our own command frequency." Kalir's voice trembled. "It is a plea for assistance in multiple languages. They are calling for help. To the cosmos." Susugo felt a coldness seep into his joints, the audacity, the sheer reckless insanity of it. These primitives, these ghosts, weren't just hiding and biting at ankles. They were trying to change the entire board. "Can you trace it? Jam it?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. "The signal's origin is too diffuse, Commander. They are using the relay's own architecture against us. It is like trying to find a single drop of water in a storm, and jamming it would require shutting down our entire global network. We would be deaf and blind." Susugo stared at the main viewer, at the beautiful, cursed planet below. His invasion, once a certain victory, had become a stalemate. And now, these humans had just invited the entire unknown universe to their doorstep. A slow, simmering fury began to replace the cold dread. They had no idea what they were doing. None. Back in the drains, hours had passed. The initial tension had given way to a numb exhaustion. The device continued its work, silent and relentless. Blake sat on an old crate, cleaning his sidearm. The familiar, mechanical routine was a comfort. Anya sat down beside him. "You're quiet." "Just thinking," Blake said, not looking up. "About what's out there." He finally stopped, sliding the magazine back into the pistol with a solid click. "Yeah. You're worried we just made a huge mistake." Blake looked at her, his face etched with the weight of command he'd never asked for. "Aren't you?" "Maybe," she admitted. "But the Dugo are here now. They're burning our cities now. They're killing us now. Whatever might be out there. That's a problem for tomorrow. We solved today's problem. We fought back in the only way we had left." She was right. It was the same brutal, practical calculus he'd used on 100 ambulance calls. You deal with the immediate, life-threatening bleed. You worry about the infection later. He nodded slowly, holstering the weapon. "Then we get ready for tomorrow." He stood up and walked back over to David, who was still monitoring the console. The screen was a swirl of static and strange harmonic symbols. "Anything?" Blake asked. David shook his head. "Just static. Silence. It could be days, years, centuries. It could be never." "Or it could be tomorrow," Blake said, his gaze fixed on the screen, on the infinite nothingness it represented. He felt no hope, not in the way people used to feel it. There was no shining cavalry waiting in the stars. There was only the unknown. It could be salvation. It could be a new, sharper hell. But it was a problem he would face when it came. For now, they had today. They had each other. They had a fight to win. He turned from the console, ready to plan the next ambush, to mend the next wound, to survive the next day. The message was sent. The silence was their answer for now. And in that silence, the scavengers would keep working.